We are starting the stream. Everybody's on stage. Alright. Hi everybody. Thanks for joining us for our May update Q&A. Please let me know in chat if there are any audio issues. Cool. Alright, Michael and Alex, what would you like to talk about to intro this update? Any new tidbits you want to share, or should we just get right into Q&A?
Man, that's the hardest question yet. Let's
I'm muted.
Q&A here.
Like a dingo. Wow.
Alex says something.
No, listen. It's a minor update, so we don't have too much to present beside the patch notes we put up. So, I mean, we could just get into Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I guess I will say there's a hot fix that'll be coming out tomorrow to address issues with accessories causing stamina and armor to behave weirdly, as well as one or two other things. Should be coming out tomorrow. It's not quite cooked through QA yet, and won't be before the day is over. But that'll come out tomorrow. So.
Great. All right, let's get into Q&A then.
Cool.
Carrion Killer asks, are there any plans to create higher tier variants of perks as part of upgrades for the characters?
We have plans longer term for a lot of stuff with like character perks and stuff. Whether or not you'll be able to like get a higher tier of it or what have you, we'll see. Never say never, but we have some other plans to flesh it out that's a little different, so you'll have some variants there. I know that was vague, sorry. Probably not at the moment, but maybe.
Right.
Yeah, we're not done with differentiating characters. You'll see they'll continue to evolve and grow over the course of early access.
Abdo asks, how % finished do you think the current memories art we have right now is? How complete are the current memories art collection? Well, will it have colors? Will there be an OST?
So for the memories,
go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, okay, I was gonna say the ones that are in the game right now. That is the intended art. So they are all sort of color toned, and there may be a reason for that if you've been looking at all of them and trying to decipher the whole story that's presented so far. But that's the desired aesthetic for all of those. There's a lot more that we are looking to have coming down the pipe, and you'll see more of them in our July update.
Yeah, I won't give a specific percentage. It's just like it's relatively small compared to the fuller scope of things that we plan to put in there for narrative. Narrative is one of those things where it is an essential part of what motivates this game and the designs and bosses and kind of structure. Like it ties into all this stuff, but to play it and enjoy it in early access, it's not essential to ship out the full version of it. So that's why we held narrative for quite some time. So we'll get there, but much closer to V1.
Lusatsu, first time in chat, welcome, wonders if the gameplay style before the last update could ever be available as a separate game mode or difficulty tier.
Unlikely. We'll see again how things go throughout the course of coming months up to version 1.0, but we're pretty settled into sort of the flow that we got now. If we want to add additional game modes down the line, especially post version 1.0, if things are doing well and we like, to continue to work on it, it's the same attitude other indies have had towards, ongoing live games, where could add modes, could take away modes, could transform modes, whatever else. We obviously don't have any other modes right now. This is it, but yeah, version 1.0, there's plenty of possibilities of what we could be doing longer term mode wise. So we'll see.
Plato of Bison, great name. Any details on buffs or reworks to certain perks? At the moment, some of them, Verm, Contractor, Warrior, Lapis, feel a little bit underwhelming compared to others.
I mean, if you have feedback on those and why you feel like they're underwhelming, definitely would love to hear that stuff. Character perks and builds and loadouts are going to continue to undergo lots of tuning and adjusting throughout the course of development to really make them be what they need to be. So they might get empowered depending on if it's too weak or vice versa, or you might find new combinations for things that make something more worthwhile than it was at the moment. We've got a lot of different modifiers planned for the game that we just need to get through. So July will have a bunch more mods for the player to pick up in a variety of ways that will potentially.
Do you have any details of when the Ma memories will become available?
Ma memories will be available in the future, but we don't have a date. Don't have a date for any specifics about memories just yet. Other than you will see, the first time you will see new memories will be in July.
Nice. July. Noxamillion.
Yes, here still.
Whoops.
Alex, I think we lost you. If you can hear us.
Alex is gone. Oh, we can hear him.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, it looks like
Something happened. Some things died. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Well, we can hear you fine though.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, your camera is saying no signal, Elgato. Did something get yoinked or?
I didn't touch a
Tried?
thing. I touched nothing, and it decided to go. Anyway, we can move on while I try and figure this out.
This is your opportunity to adjust
Sounds
your
good.
trousers. Noxamillion asks, we've gotten a decent number of new blades in the updates since release, but so far no new rails. Are there any plans to add new rails in the upcoming updates?
Yes, there will be new rails in future updates. The next major update that we have will be July. There will be a monthly update in June as well, and you will see new rails in future updates. That's what I'll say right now.
Alex is back.
I'm back. Yeah, I don't know. Everything just died and then turned back on. Apropos of nothing, so.
Cool.
What's the next question?
Jen, I like the accessory idea, but I think the execution should be changed just a bit. How about having a chance of them drop from bosses?
Yeah, we're going to do a variety of things with bosses and drops, so. You know, as we're putting things in, sometimes those systems won't be in the exact spaces we want them in, or, you know, are imbalanced in the way that they drop, so definitely there's a lot of consideration there for things like accessories and amps and whatever else, and like how they drop and where they drop and how often. So expect changes for sure in the coming months on many fronts with drops.
Kairu or Kiru, do you guys plan to make the main gameplay loop longer?
No.
Easy answer. MK Artade. What does the team define as development priorities currently and looking ahead past launch? The idea I've gotten is more of everything, which is fine, but past that, what does the team believe will make Breaker stand out enough to be success out there? What it should be from scratch in particular?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of our roadmap internally is just filled with systems, you know, and tuning ultimately. When it comes to systems, there's a lot of stuff that we still haven't put in, you know, bigger and smaller systems that will help to flesh out things you're doing in the world / meta progression. So those are big parts of what's coming in July and what's coming after those months. So And then the other half of it is just a lot of balance tuning throughout the course of it. As we layer in systems, it takes time to just get that stuff right. And we definitely won't immediately get it right on release. We're pushing to get it right as we can, and then it just takes further testing, tuning, feedback, because lots of hours go into testing itself. And anytime we change a variety of numbers, so the main thing we think will differentiate this stuff is just the remaining systems and things we're putting into the game that cohesively and collectively will make something for the bigger picture that stands out.
Abdo and Champ both ask, could we see a difficulty option at some point? I feel like some of my friends have a hard time with the difficulty making parts of the game inaccessible.
Yeah, there will be some modifiers going on. We'll have more information on that later. Won't get into too much on it, but we'll have ways to modify that stuff to make it to change how things sort of are tuned and to make some things harder. When it comes to baseline difficulty and making things easier, those are things we can keep discussing. It is a multiplayer game ultimately, and so we want to balance some of that out. We're unlikely to put in like a story mode that you can just complete, because sort of the point of the game is to dig in and have a challenge and die, and it's very difficult to balance for easier versions of it. It's more straightforward to balance, to make things harder and harder and harder and pile that on, but to keep things progressing at a good pace, much more difficult in a game like this where death really matters and runs really matter in this way, to sort of detune it on that front. So we'll see. It's not off the table to do potentially some modifiers for folks in the options that maybe need some assistance here and there. We won't tackle it in the immediate future, but potentially before version 1.0, we might have some stuff like that. So not off the table, just not on our radar in the next few months.
Foe asks, who made the skull mural in the cursed outpost? They cooked, and I wish to give my compliments to the chef.
Gosh, who was that originally?
I don't know. It's cool.
You're right.
I know what they're talking about. That's been there forever.
Danny's
before your
chat,
time,
she
Michael.
says that was me.
Okay, I was gonna say Danny, but I didn't want to.
Okay, it was Danny. Yeah.
I didn't want to.
Danny.
Yeah, it's been there for quite some time, so it was before your time here on Michael. Yeah, it's great.
I think when I first saw the hub, that was one of the things that I was like, oh wow, that's dope. So yeah, that has been in there for.
We've had like 5 different people touch the hub, so I didn't want to misspeak on exactly who did the mural.
And that's when you decided to join Heart Machine.
Because of the mural.
I had already decided to join, and then that just confirmed it was the right choice.
Kiru asks, how do you feel about the current state of Ma?
All the buses will continue to have tuning, polish. The state that we're at in general with bosses is they will need more work overall. So, we've got the core bits in there, the main move sets, but it's going to continue to take more polish, like camera things, and she's larger, so she'll take more time and effort than some of the others in some ways because of that camera difference and communication. So, she amongst all the bosses need more work for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Polaire asks, question for Alex. Can you share any design references for the Machinist, formerly Snowchild in Solar Ash and PC?
Design references. I don't know. When I drew her back in the day, it was a million years ago, well before this game. I think the only reference that I had was thinking of like the Ed and Eddie plank, where they have the face drawn on it. And I'd want to draw a kid and didn't know what they were doing and were again raised by a computer, and would definitely not know how to draw well or keep themselves company, so would just end up drawing a very crude mask for themselves to look maybe what they thought was scary. So no, I don't have a specific reference besides that.
Hey, Christian Sparks is here. Any chances of a THPS style soundtrack that only plays when you're hoverboarding?
Oh my god, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. What a good game.
Yes, that'd be great. Let's can we just get the
Is
whole
there
soundtrack in there?
Yeah, we'll get Green Day and what was the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 main song?
I don't know. Superman was like
Superman.
one of them, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a pretty big one.
Tony Hawk soundtracks and Burnout soundtracks had a outsized impact on my music tastes.
Yeah. Honestly, I wish licensing music was less bananas when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah.
Invoker SMB, first time in chat. This is a question that often comes up in chat, but since it's your first time, I'll re-ask it. In the far future, thoughts on adding sick tricks while riding the hoverboard?
We definitely have some of that stuff on the docket to expand on hoverboard in a variety of ways, and tricks might be part of it. So again, we gotta see how much time and space we have for things like that, because that costs, animation, whatever else, and we gotta prioritize. But we definitely all want to make more sick tricks.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see Indie Cross yet, both of you? Question from Reflection.
The animation?
Yes.
Yeah, I watched it.
It's pretty cool.
I have not. I want to sit down and check it out, but
it's lengthy.
I've been busy,
surprisingly.
And yeah, it's like I want to make it an event.
Yeah.
And that means realistically, it's going to be 6 months before I take a look at it.
Yeah.
Whenever I want to.
Fortunately,
that's how I.
Yeah. Fortunately, I don't have a life.
Watch party. We should set that up.
Yeah.
My life consists of doing work and then taking breaks watching YouTube videos while I eat. So I did spend some broken up time watching it. Very impressive what they're able to do on that whole thing, and the fact that it's, as a person that has made some animation in his time, I know how much work goes into that stuff. So that's a lot, and that's very cool that you're able to put all that stuff in. And thanks for putting the drifter in there.
Yeah, it just hit, I think, 4.7 million views today.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Wow.
I think they captured some cool spirit of the drifter in there too, as far as a character goes.
All right. Mage Farago. Currently, there are many hollow bites that don't fit into any sort of build and are generally underwhelming to use during a run. In my opinion, weapon affixes and status effects are a lot more interesting than the current holobite pool, but it's not engaging to have re-roll weapon affixes in order to create a fun synergistic build during a run. What changes are planned for the overall holobite system in this regard?
You'll see in July, beyond just adding stuff, we're starting to address stuff on status effects more thoroughly, and we'll be layering in different ways to synergize that stuff. So I guess without getting too into the dirt or weeds about it, it's just agreed. All that stuff is true, and we're definitely working our way through the lists of things included on status effects, since they're very cool and important, but don't have enough ways to kind of interact with themselves or holobites. So we're addressing it. Hopefully in July you'll start to see some of that stuff, so you can get more specifics then. But I don't have like a list of quick patch notes I can give you without diving into 20 minutes of our thinking on why we do this, and that for these particular mods versus these mods versus those mods, and all the theory crafting behind it. Which, again, go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, we'll continue to be adding new holobites and expanding that and balancing and tweaking those things. There's a space where you need to have a critical mass of all of those before all of the synergies that we want to see in the game start showing up, right? Like if things are supposed to work together, A, B, C, but we only have B in at the moment. Yeah, it's you're right. It's not gonna synergize with everything yet. If you have feedback, we'd love to post feedback. You said that was Mage Ferraro. Farago. I know they post a lot of feedback, so I'd say anyone who has feedback, we read all that stuff. Specifically, if it's in the feedback channel, the feedback and bugs channel, I think there are like 3 people, myself included, who go through that and scrub to at least have read all of that and bring bring back
Yeah.
useful information to the team. So if you post there, we will see it. If you post somewhere else, we won't. But you'll see more ways to interact with holobytes and more holobytes and balancing all through up to version 1.0.
Yeah, kind of last thing I'll say on the subject overall, as far as feedback goes, too, is, we definitely see all these things. Ultimately, this is what early access is for. Like, certain things will be complete and some won't, and you'll see those deficits more clearly in some spaces and less clearly in others. And one of those is, hey, our mods across the board, whether it's holobytes or satisfacts and all that, it just takes time. So we definitely see those things and agree, like, those need work, and we'll have more things going into them over the course of the rest of early access. Sometimes you'll get a bigger bump and maybe a lot more things will make sense very quickly, and sometimes it'll be a little longer tail. There's orders of operation and prioritization that we have internally for good reason, because we only have so many people working on it. But we're addressing it, and like Michael said, we definitely read that stuff, and I largely agree with most of the feedback. Like, yeah, we know, not done yet. We're getting there. Thanks for the patience as we get things in, so you can start to see how bits come together.
Mage follows up to say they will listen to 20 minutes on your design philosophy, please.
In a different forum, I think. Where it can just be me sitting there, and you don't have to entertain AEE, or Michael, you don't have to sit here and do stuff because you all have better things to do.
Do we?
I mean, yeah. Yeah, kind of. Pretty sure.
All right.
I mean, I thought you were producing, but I
no.
I guess. My mistake.
I'm just along for the ride.
All right. Saxy Mitch. Absolutely loving this game. My wife and I play it all the time and take turns with our runs using our favorite characters. Question. Do you plan on giving any breakers highly specific abilities in addition to their unique stats? Like faster run speed, triple jump, can hold 2 rails but no physical weapon, etc.
That's what the perks end up being. You'll start to see more varieties of them, and how they sort of interact with different systems and buttons and things like that. So, and we'll be having more varieties of those perks per character as well. So we kind of rolled out the more basic ones for now, but you'll start to see more transformative ones or interesting ones in a number of ways. Maybe there will be a quadruple jump. No, I don't think there will ever be a quadruple jump, but yes, for sure. Wanting to do some wilder, more intense differences between our player characters is a big part of moving forward with perks and the weapons they use and all that stuff, and even other aspects that we're continuing to sort of make sure we get right before we put live.
I know you already addressed it a little bit before, but Doom is following up on the Maw question, saying the fight is a lot lengthier than other crowns and poses much less of a challenge due to slow attacks and a massive health pool. Are any of the upcoming tweaks going to address that?
That's great feedback. We definitely have balancing to do earlier rather than later in probably the next milestone update. We have a couple of things like that in different respects for enemies. So, yeah. Well, it's good feedback. If you haven't posted it already, please do. But I think it is on our radar that, yeah, the Maw fight should be can be balanced better with some quick changes on our end, but obviously that takes time to test and all that, so I wouldn't expect like a hot fix for it, but probably for next minor update.
Yeah. Early on, Maw was actually super lethal at one point, and as you balance, you steer, you don't have like a magic perfect get it right the first time. You lean one way, you lean the other, back and forth, like balancing in Tony Hawk Pro Skater. You got the thing, and you got to kind of it's pushing one way or another, and you got to wiggle it until you get there. We know she's too easy right now. She was too hard early on, and we didn't put that version out. And she'll continue to continue to narrow into where she needs to be. Same thing with all our crowns.
Yeah. Also,
all games are Tony Hawk.
All games are Tony Hawk. Yeah. Let's move to the next question. That's true.
Jen, is there a possibility for memory fragments to give something else when you got all the memories?
I mean, it completes the story. So once that system is fully implemented, you'll start to see how that comes together later on.
Mysterious.
I mean, it's always difficult to talk about these, like balance out, like how much do we talk about versus how much do we keep, close to the vest for any number of reasons, including stuff is subject to change internally, versus, hey, we just don't want to talk about it yet because we're still actively working on it, making sure it actually follows through on those things. But, definitely our narrative components are a big part of completing the game, so it'll have some good payoff there, regardless of exactly what ends up happening with that collection.
Kiru, what are your thoughts about extracting, restoring medkits? To me, it feels like extracting is always the better pick over buying medkits.
I mean, I think it depends, but generally I think you're probably accurate in that. So, this is where tuning comes in and prices and stuff like that come in, changing numbers to see how that value, the risk and reward and the value of that makes sense. So right now, probably, generally speaking, I don't really get the medkit either, so.
Yeah, the medkit is useful when you're sitting at I have 300 bright blood or 400 bright blood and I need 450 to level up, but I'm also one tapped. So then you might spend some so that you can be able to get the next level and not waste bright blood. But yeah, these are all things that we can balance, and more feedback, more better.
It also depends on the player. You might have a certain experience where you never do X, Y, or Z, but we get data from a variety of sources, and as more players join up, that spread can. I'm not saying in this case that's what is happening, but just in general, some things might not be tuned that may seem obvious to you or to some other people because of your playstyle, because of maybe you're very good at these things, or some other players not as good at that thing, and so that's also a consideration is how we balance it globally. And sometimes that it doesn't always address certain problems certain people have, especially in a game with this many systems. So, but that is one thing. Yeah, it's on the radar.
Cool. Sin, question for the Breaker team. How do you think you'll balance enemy encounters in the future? Will there be difficulty modifiers similar to something like Risk of Rain?
Yeah, generally we've been talking a lot about that these last couple of weeks again. So, we have world tiers, and that's kind of our way to modify / spawn new enemy variants. So we intend to push sort of the delta between early run enemies and late run enemies a lot further, as well as kind of your gear overall to make things a bit more bananas on the later part of a run.
Heartsocket. If I remember correctly, I saw some old footage which showed a player fighting with dual axes and then suddenly swinging a bloody pillar. Are there any plans to bring back this dual blade system, assuming that's what it was, or was it scrapped?
Yeah, we used to be able to swap out between your couple of different melee weapons. So, no, not at the moment. That was ages ago, and we've kind of moved past that version of things. Where swapping was one of the problems with it is we couldn't quite find a good place for it, even though it was fun briefly. And ultimately, a system like that that's so central to combat needs to have long-term value, not just like this is fun for 20 minutes, because the novelty wears off pretty quickly, and you need to balance around a lot of different key pieces when it comes to loadouts and equipment and enemies and all that stuff. So unlikely to make a return in any way. That was, well over a year ago. 2 years ago, maybe. I don't remember at this point.
If I know what they're talking about, I think it was when before we had blade specials. you could. There was a period of time where we were still messing with what blades of what specials and how
Yeah,
those things work and all that. So if it was like they popped out the bloody pillar for like one attack kind of thing, that might have been.
There was a couple of different versions, but we definitely had a version
yeah.
where it was just swap between the two equipped melee weapons. But again, that was like 2+ years ago, I think, at this point, or something like that, some ancient build. So again, even if something seems fun or cool, all games go through many different iterations on trying stuff before it can work. And obviously, like, the more complex it is and the more variables you have, the more stuff you might need to try. So loadout and the buttons you're using and the amount of things you have to pay attention to has definitely been one of our core sets of design that are, we really got to be careful about balancing around, and things that we've tried a lot of to make sure we balance out sort of not too tactical and hardcore combat. We're not making a Dark Souls game in that way, but also not too simplistic and lacking depth combat. So we make a lot of decisions, try a lot of things, see sometimes ideas on paper and even ideas that do feel good for a little bit run their course, and that was definitely one that ran its course some time back.
Jen, are we ever gonna get some sort of VR room training range in the hub to test weapons or practice stuff like parry?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be in the future, closer to version 1.0. We want to expand their tutorial and training options and give you the ability to practice more, but we also have a lot of critical things to put in the game that are not tutorial focused.
Yeah, it'll be much closer to V1. So.
Heartsocket, follow-up silly question. Since blues are cat people, does this mean they can purr?
I don't see why not.
Similar silly question. Have you guys ever thought of how the breakers would look like if they were humans?
No.
Michael, have you thought about it?
I have not, honestly. I have just assumed that they are what they are and have just sort of taken that at face value. I haven't. I used to think more about that kind of stuff back in my art days many years ago, but now they're them.
Yeah. As a person that did a lot of the original, or pretty much all the original designs for the characters, especially on the breaker side of things, I never thought of them as anything but what they were. Part of their core design and how I do character design is thinking about key visual features. So it's hard to remove that, and it's not the same character at the end of the day. So definitely the design's changed a lot. So.
On this topic, can Drifter purr?
Oh, I'm not going to get into that.
Alright. Foe, not a question, but I think the giant cube is hilarious. Thank you for adding it.
It is pretty funny.
Heart Plus. Question about status effects. Will there be any additional debuffs added, and how does the team go about balancing them? Thanks.
Yeah, we have other status effects planned, and we have some stuff planned for July again around status effects. So you'll see some significant changes for them for the better across a few different aspects of status effects. The basic thing I'll say is we want to make them more central to our build experience. So we're taking steps to do that. Whether that will be the end all be all for July, it'll be a significant set of steps forward, and we'll keep iterating on that.
Can you speak more to where we're at with respect to outfit customization or skins for weapons, gear, that kind of thing?
We definitely want to do more cosmetic stuff, cosmetic stuff generally. Again, it's probably closer to a version 1.0 for most of that stuff, but there are possibly some things coming down the pipe between now and a version 1 that we'll start to talk about like pallets for things and stuff for gear. But it's high up on our radar. Generally speaking, we just got to find the time to start to do that, which might be sooner than later. So, not going to promise anything specifically for any time. Just know that we want to do it, and we'll see how much of that we can actually reasonably do and in what time frame. So, we're talking about it.
Morpheus 666. Will you make medkit auto usage an EXE?
Maybe unlikely. It's kind of a key part of it. So
it's in the tutorial right now, so I don't know that we would want to do that and remove it from the tutorial. Making sort of load-bearing stuff like that an EXE is really good for teaching people it exists, but it's not something we'd want to have players play without. Yeah,
when we made that change, it was pretty fundamental, and sometimes fundamental thing needs to be there from the start, and you wouldn't want to take it away.
Rice Crispy. Loving how the shrine is more like a bonfire now. Is there any way you can make it possible to freely use our mouse when interacting, though? It gets pretty finicky, and clicking what you want on menus would make it a lot easier.
I mean, keyboard mouse control stuff is an ongoing, we want to keep making sure we do better on that front over time. So it's on the list for addressing UI flow things and leaning into more KBM.
Mage Farago. Is the preferred weapon pool for each character going to be a permanent feature? A lot of the appeal of roguelikes is being able to discover new synergies and builds with different weapons, and restricting the pool for each character feels like it really dampens a lot of the build potential.
We're going to keep refining. Part of what makes for a good roguelike is under the hood. There's a lot of curation that goes on, whether it be Hades or other titles of that ilk. Pure random is never really a good thing, and so trying to control or refine or again curate the experience of players usually get this or usually get that, or when they get this, then they are more likely to get these things or eliminate other options is a really important thing under the hood that goes into all the good roguelikes. So, we're going to keep fiddling with those types of funneling and like blacklist versus whitelist things and expanding or contracting. So it's not the end all be all right now. And especially as the pools grow for different parts of the game, we add more weapons, we add more mods, special stuff. We're gonna keep adjusting and tuning for all that stuff. The goal ultimately for that type of curation on a per character basis is to make sure that they feel like like an archetype or a set of archetypes. And so again, as we add more modifiers and other weapons to the pool, that stuff will become more apparent, and that funneling, I think, will start to feel a little less restrictive and more like you can get consistently good builds of this type with these characters. So it just takes a bit of time to get all those things in the pool.
Mark Vinter Valentine. What a great username. First time in chat, welcome. Will we be able to play as PB at one point?
Unlikely. We'll see.
The Mystic Loner. Is the Drifter from Hyperlight Drifter a part of the Breaker organization in this game?
No. Nothing to do with it.
Foe. Very important question. How are you all so cool?
We take a lot of steroids.
That's drugs and bad choices.
Yes.
No, being
correct.
cool is a matter of being kind, open to new experiences, and listening to other people and learning what's interesting to them, and incorporating the stuff you like into your own life. So
I think being cool is defined as smoking cigarettes, Michael. Pretty sure.
Man, you're right. It's being cool is being the Marlboro man. The Marlboro man. That's a different.
I think Joe Camel's the coolest cigarette guy.
Yeah.
He's my cigarette guy.
We are sounding super old right now, by the way. because like we were kids
Everyone,
and Joe Camel had to
listen,
be taken out back and shot.
anybody
because
born
we shouldn't sell
after
cigarettes to children.
2016 still knows Joe Camel. He's imprinted permanently on our consciousness. I mean, yeah, I'm a 90s kid. I grew up in the 90s, so definitely it was weird to see a character like Joe Camel around that was definitely not marketed towards kids at all. Cool cartoon guy with a cigarette, and then watch that go away because, hey, maybe that's a bad idea. Anyway, Joe Camel. If you don't know who Joe Camel is, look him up. He's the coolest camel I ever knew.
Fo, do you regret asking that question?
No, don't regret. That's a great answer that we gave. Those are great answers.
Moving on. Conde, are we going to get clues about Alex's life in the Overgrowth? Like that one time I found a room full of mechanical hearts beating in Hyperlight Drifter.
Oh, I keep mechanical hearts all over my house. I mean, different game, different story, different requirements here, especially like the multiplayer flow. So, there's stuff in here that's still part of the story of Drifter that feeds into some of those things. But this is very much a different setup and theming, and not quite so personal in those ways. Intentionally.
Polaire, are you all able to share how close the soccer mini game is looking? Is it something for 1.0?
Maybe.
Soccer minigame is very far away.
Maybe not. I probably more than likely a version past the V1.0 thing. Honestly, we got a lot to do before we start to get into mini games. Would love to make it a thing, but we'll see. We got a field for it.
Yep, that's half the battle.
Guts.
75% of the battle.
Will there be more elite enemies roaming the Overgrowth in the future?
We definitely have more leads planned.
Mm-hmm.
You might see some of them next big update.
Yeah,
who
July
knows?
might have a lot of things.
Who knows? Who knows what's coming in July? Definitely not us.
Yeah.
Samuel, would there be a way to select which shrine you spawn in after extracting? I imagine you've considered this before and have some reason for not doing it, but I figured I'd ask.
Because we're such lazy developers, No, we definitely talked a lot about the shrines and when you come back in and all that. There are like limitations, considerations to keep it simple, but we might still do that. It really depends.
The shrine you extract from is the shrine you will come back in on. So right now, if you want to choose to come in at a particular shrine, you should extract through that shrine. So like, if you want to show up next to a crown, when you come back in, extract near them, and you should come back in.
Yeah.
At that
part
point.
Part of it too is like Michael's talking about there. Like, well, if you want to come back from a certain one, think about the strategy of it. When we're making certain decisions, just about any design in our games, and in particular this game, there's kind of an array of smaller and larger considerations we need to make. And part of that array is how much work is it for us to do this thing as a feature or whatever else it might be, versus what's the reward of that. If it's like a more minor quality of life convenience thing and it's relatively cheap to do, then that's more likely to go into the priority list. If it's something that isn't going to massively affect the flow of things or doesn't have that many drawbacks, but again is more of a preferential thing, but is going to take a lot of extra work to do and might be risky in ways, that usually doesn't get on the list. So that type of feature in particular might take a lot more work than it seems. There's a lot to like the procedural generation, having stuff in the map versus having stuff come back to the hub and visualizing that is a bit deceptive. So seems like maybe an easy thing, but it's not as easy as you would hope. So again, doesn't mean it wouldn't necessarily go. I'm saying like no, never. It's just it's not the highest on the list, and if we wanted to do that change, and that might be true for again a lot of the decisions we make, or that is always true for like the math we're doing in the background, like the equation that we have for like what features genuinely go in or not, and typically it comes down to bang for the buck and how hard is it / how risky is it for us to put it in, and versus the true value of it in the game. That's why we don't have the /pizza command in here like World of Warcraft used to have. Everyone demanded it, and it was going to take a lot of work to negotiate with Domino's Pizza. Did you know that command still exists in that game?
Does it still work? That's kind of cool, actually. That's kind of horrifying to me, as thinking about what tortured like ordering pipeline does the
probably,
World of Warcraft /
yeah, it probably runs on some ancient 1999 computer that
it's
has
probably
Windows
like a fax
98.
machine somewhere.
Yeah, definitely a fax machine. Punch out fax.
Alright, Ninja Guy has a fantastic question. When leaving early access into 1.0, how do you plan to bring in a new or returning audience for the game? What is the mini sales pitch I could give to my friends to try the game again as it enters a fuller release?
Yeah, I mean, when we get to out of early access, whenever that exactly is going to be and whatever we label as that, we'll have marketing efforts behind that, obviously. And, that experience is something that will tie in pretty heavily to a bigger push as we talk about it on, streams and forums and whatever else. Our publisher will be buying ad time and all that. And so, what we put forward definitely has to be meaningfully different than what we launched with in a lot of different ways, not just adding the features and polish. We want to make sure the game is putting its best foot forward early on, especially, and so there'll be a level of polish there. But I don't know. Do I have a good short elevator pitch of why you should pick it up? I think around that time, whenever that exactly might be, just saying something around the realm of, hey, it's a multiplayer open world roguelike, and it sure is fun to play for a few hours and is worth the price. That's the generic version of it,
Yes.
Because these days, it's everyone's got their games right in their lanes, and it's harder and harder to get people to pay attention to anything but their World of Warcraft or Overwatch or Marvel Rivals. People silo a lot, so definitely finding compelling reasons to tell your friends, come on over and play this with me, is a good call out. Something we haven't really talked about that might be, very cool to do, that our publisher did with Risk of Rain, and that we might want to do too, or at least I believe they did this, where they gave a kind of buy one get one free copy type of key thing going on for Risk of Rain 2 at some point, so that they could get people to play multiplayer with them. So I think that's a potential version for us to ways to say hey, you get a free key if you play with me type of things to get people invested. So we'll see. Again, no promises, but I'll have a better answer for you once we are there and we can say very clearly what is there. But ultimately, we're trying to reach that goal for version 1.0 of it plays pretty seamlessly and is ultimately very fun for any number of hours. And we've gotten rid of a lot of the jank.
Bye-bye, jank. I'm a hippo.
Sorry, jank.
Will rerolls be added? Maybe for loot drops or for holobytes when leveling up?
We got rerolls in a couple of other facets, so definitely. And look, we are always looking into things like that, of where else should we provide a few more options, and rerolls are a fun one. So maybe. Put it in the feedback.
Heart Socket. What kinds of new stuff should we expect to explore as the open world gets further fleshed out?
pizza delivery, as I mentioned previously. We'll have a little obelisk that you go up to that asks you if you want pepperoni or mushrooms. There will definitely be more interactable components in the world. We focused on launch, getting the core, pieces of combat and sort of our POIs and spread of the world composition in to a good, consistent spot. But as we move forward in the coming months and up to version 1.0, expect you'll have more varieties of interaction in the game. It's not just combat and pick stuff up. There might be ways to get different buffs in different ways, or more traversal things, or kind of challenge-oriented stuff, etc., etc. That those layered aspects to make exploration and discovery more compelling. Because again, right now it's like very focused on kind of the combat and collection stuff, and we'll just be fleshing a lot of that stuff out. So, things that you might expect from a world might be there, and might be there sooner than later.
Birdshot. Are your favorite playable characters already in the game, or still to come?
To come. There's a couple that I'm really waiting to see come out. I think we already have some in the promo art, like the robot character. I'm excited to have that one come out later on.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, long question from Jen. How do you feel about the extraction side of the game? Are you guys still considering the game part of the extraction genre even after Buried Below?
That's not really. I mean, there's a component there, but I don't think I would describe it as an extraction game. I think it's pretty easy to just be like open world roguelike, and people will generally, I think, understand what that is. Extraction games have a very specific flavor to them and kind of a hardcore nature to them, and other things that we will never dig into systemically, nor do we want to, because not many of us are like hardcore extraction players. I mean, I'm definitely not. I think the most into an extraction style game that I got into was the Call of Duty DMZ thing, and they shut that down, which sucked because it was fun, it was good. But no, not. I wouldn't put that as a label. Even if we have an extraction element, which we do, it's not the same type of thing that genre's really accomplishing with it or trying to do with that. Michael's more of an extraction player than anybody else.
Yeah, I giggled when you said not too many people. Like, I have thousands of hours in Tarkov. I just prestiged. To Alex's point, we're not an extraction genre game. In the same way, like Call of Duty's not an RPG, but boy howdy, are there a bunch of experience bars everywhere in that game. That was like Call of Duty's biggest innovation, 20 years ago.
Call of Duty is my Final Fantasy.
And so it's like, with that in mind, it's like we're using the mechanic, and we're using the mechanic because it fits with what we want to do, which is make a world that is honestly larger than what a roguelike run in an action game typically is. And this lets us get to that, I don't want to say like session length, because that sounds very businessy, but that's like a game thing. It's like that lets a single run within a cycle be closer to 20 to 30 minutes if you want, or less, rather than having to commit for an hour plus for each of these things. So extraction is part of the game, it's not the genre. Open world roguelike is the genre.
Yeah. Even when we had done stuff early on for the initial release where there was more of a focus on some of that extraction and like loot collection, still would not have called it like an extraction genre game. Like, it's still primarily, trying to do these other things on the roguelike side. Like Michael's saying, there's mechanics you can use from different genres for different reasons, and all sorts of games push and pull from different games they're inspired by. So it makes sense for what we're trying to do, but making sure it plays correctly within that. So the intention of this game from very early on years ago in the pitch was like, it is a roguelike, period. Like, that was its core conceit. How it evolved over time and different aspects and mechanics that came in definitely ebbed and flowed over time, and have ebbed and flowed in early access cycle too. So I think moving forward, also to speak to that and kind of finish my answer on this, but we feel pretty, I think we answered this last time too, like, we feel pretty good overall about our key flow and mechanics here. We're not trying to do more like major shifts and structurally to like how the underpinnings of the game manifest. So, we're not unlikely to do more with extraction stuff or like again fundamentally change other structural components across the game. We want to lean into what we're doing. Obviously iterate a whole lot on it and polish the heck out of it as we go through early access and more.
Birdshot. Plans to add secrets behind achievements or unusual actions, like climbing the highest point of a map, etc.?
Evos. Yeah. Achievements can be cool and fun. How you measure the highest point in a procedural game is definitely up for braining on, but yeah, I think we definitely will be doing some things like that, for achievements longer term. Maybe not that one in specific, but
Perfectly mediocre. Will the variants of the enemies, example, white explodey dirks or black projectile dirks, get different 3D models?
No. The elites have different 3D models for the silhouettes, but the variants, the reason why we're able to do those variants is because it doesn't cost us $1 million to make one,
Mm-hmm.
All right, we are just at time now, and I know you guys have to jump off to go continue making video games. I'm going to wrap it up with one final question from Sin. What other things do you have planned to implement that continue the risk versus reward theming of the gameplay?
The risk versus reward theming. Many different things, but I think the high level, again, there's a lot. It's a complex, layered, detailed game. So I could go on and on. We could both go on and on about the subject, but I think ultimately, there's good friction and bad friction in games, and the good friction in games that like makes things have tension and feel interesting and give you that little sigh of relief, especially in a more combat-focused game, will rely on the in-run progression and the feeling of that and the balancing of that. The danger of enemies, how powerful you feel at any given moment versus how vulnerable you are. Those are the things that we're going to really be digging into over the coming months in a number of ways to make sure that a lot of that risk reward becomes more apparent, and again that good friction and tension building becomes much more prominent in ways that it isn't right now. So
yeah, I think if we get everything we want to get into the July update, there will be 3 or 4 features that play into that very specifically, and I don't want to say any more about them right now, but when you see them you'll be like, oh yeah, there's clearly I can press my luck here, or I can play it safe, but who dares wins, so you should get in there.
We're putting a gambling machine in it. You'll play 21 Skidoo and risk all your money.
You feed your parents' credit card into it, and then we sell you blind boxes until
there we go.
We get boat money.
Yeah. Yep, this is the accurate information.
Yeah, it's all gotcha all the way down.
Hell yeah. You heard it here first. Gotcha game, baby.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Hyper loot unboxer. There we go.
This is what everyone wants, we've been told.
Yeah. The market demands that, and probably crypto somewhere.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's got to be some way to mix crypto and loot boxes and like just general like multi-level marketing things to just make the worst possible human existence.
We at Heart Machine
that's what we
we at Heart Machine constantly talk about Web3 and how to better Web3ify all of our products.
That's a good
anyway.
note.
Hope that was a great send-off.
yeah, let's end on that note.
Now, I think people know I fucking hate Web3 shit generally, so... and it is illegal here.
Same.
I would like to just make
yeah.
video games that are good.
Yes, video games that are good and
Time's up.
fun and that people can play with other people.
Yeah.
There are no loot box mechanics coming, and yeah, all this was a joke, to be clear. But there are several big new features coming in July that will give you more options in how you approach the world, what choices you make in the world, and the rewards you get for making some of those choices.
Yeah, there's not a single person on our team that would, genuinely suggest like an NFT or, loot boxy mechanic in any of our games. I can say that with pretty great confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
All right.
thanks, guys, for the comments, for the time, and for working really hard on updates.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for joining up. And we'll see you in the next update.
Yeah,
Keep
thank
adding
you, everyone.
feedback, please.
Catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.